Ooh. Good evening, everybody. This is Chris from Ergonomics. It is approaching 10 p.m. on this fine Friday night in the great state of New York, and I should not be drinking this coffee right now. But in celebration of my first review in my new, essentially permanent address, I decided to have a little pick-me-up before we reviewed the Nerf rival Hera. Now, this review is going to be a bit short. I don't have too much action footage for this blaster, but I do have some fairly strong opinions on it. Should you buy this blaster? Should you not buy this blaster? And all the other things that we could throw in there as well. I haven't seen anybody else's review on this blaster, just my own data we are working off of, so I may mention some things or not mention things that you've seen in other reviews. So let's just get started and sit back and enjoy the ride. First off, what is this blaster? This is a flywheel-driven, semi-automatic rival ball blaster using flywheels, and I believe it is either 4 or 6D batteries. I'll roll that in, but enough to make it a pretty chunky and pretty heavy blaster. This guy, I'll put a magazine up for it for scale. This guy is not too long, but it's rather dense. So the battery pack goes back here, it screws in, it's held on by one screw over here, and you could drop that in. I'll understand that you can also use a LiPo by Nerf or something like that as well. I don't have access to that. I was just using the D batteries. And by the way, this is a stock review. This isn't a modded review or anything like that. I have not touched this blaster on the inside. So this is just for stock. Should you buy this if you don't intend to modify it? So overall, this guy is heavier than you would expect. I don't have a scale on me, but maybe 3 or 4 pounds, which again, not that heavy. For a Nerf blaster, it's not expected for this kind of weight. Let's get into the controls before I get too sidetracked. First off, you're going to have a rev trigger here, which is only active when a magazine is fully inserted. So there is that little kind of cutoff there. This blaster uses a heel release to pull the mags in and out. I'm indifferent to that. There are some people that feel very strongly about the heel release versus a trigger finger release versus, I don't know, a button for your thumb like 1911 style. I really don't have a preference. It works fine for me. I have nothing against it. A cool feature I found was this actual kind of really obvious mechanical safety here. Prevents you from revving the blaster or pulling the trigger. So it's not just an electrical switch, it's actually a mechanical lock here. You might want to remove that if you're going to mod it. I could see myself being fidgety during a game and kind of playing with it and messing myself up in the middle of an actual humans versus zombies game or a casual Nerf war, something like that. But I don't have strong feelings on that either, just kind of don't touch it. Jam door up here pushes up like this and you can see inside of it. And then you can see those big beefy flywheels in there and a kind of unique pusher mechanism. It's hard to see from this angle, but essentially it is, let me take that safety off. Essentially it is just a star that rotates. Having difficulties with this at the moment. There we go, safety's off. See, I was fidgeting with it. But basically, when you have darts loaded in your magazine in the back, it kind of flicks them into place. And if there's any kind of jam in there, it might not make it through. I'm going to try and do this with one hand here. But if I put my finger there, I can effectively stop that star from moving without too much force. And we'll get back to that because I kind of think that is a bit of a flaw here, especially compared to some of the other designs out there. I think that's it for controls. Overall features on this blaster as well. Something that surprised me was that, and I'm kind of dancing around it here, but this is a really big handle. But for that really big handle here, basically the pistol grip you got here, there is no flared mag well. This is a straight-in magazine hole, but there's no flare in that magwell whatsoever. So if you are not looking at this thing or really thinking about this, you can very easily kind of do and completely miss this here. For the size of this, I'm very shocked that there is no flare feature at all. I think the best thing to do would be to actually look at the thing while you're inserting it, or to kind of insert it more vertically and then have it be pushed the rest of the way in. I'm using this shorter magazine here because this long guy is just not as easy to manipulate in a small area here. So no flared magwell. I really wish they had that. You might be able to just take your Dremel and make it kind of flared, or have some kind of epoxy sculpt or something like that and make your own flared magwell, but that's definitely a ding in my book. The other things so far have not been too big of an issue for me. And now let's address the ergonomics of the thing and what I've kind of been dancing around. This blaster, and just look at this for size, this blaster is really wide and really chunky in almost every way. Now, biases up front, my hands are not huge. I'd say I have medium-sized hands at best, so usually even with that, I don't have too much of an issue with big pistol grips on, just Nerf blasters in general. But gripping this, there's something about it that's just so bulbous and bulky. It's 2 sizes too large in my opinion, and you can see it here too if you want to get an idea. I can just barely kind of get the tips of my middle finger and my thumb to touch if I'm holding this. I'm at a bit of a weird angle, but you can still get the idea. If I'm wearing gloves, that's made even worse. So using this in the winter with like full gloves, there's just something about it that rubs me the wrong way. In addition, the rest of the blaster is kind of the same. This grip here is kind of chunky. This guy here, that's almost double the size of this. It's very blocky, it's very bulky, and I ended up kind of almost doing a 2 fingers forward like this when I was holding the thing in the HVZ war that I used this at. I used this exclusively at one of the upstate New York HVZ events just to kind of get an idea of how this thing operated. Overall, it's a short blaster. I guess they were trying to go with like a PDW kind of feel. But if that was the case, then I think they should have made a better semi-automatic kind of mechanism or made it full auto. I was actually really kind of disappointed when I took this thing out of the box and it was only semi-auto and not full auto. I was also observing, again, with just stock internals, the range on these rival balls would drop off very quickly if you tried to pull off a few rapid shots very quickly. So that was kind of a disappointment. I'll roll in some footage there. And then finally, again, I mentioned that this thing is heavier than it looks. And also, this guy right here is kind of what killed the blaster for me. And one other thing, but first, this guy right here was what killed the blaster for me. And I'm going to get in the best position I can to show you this. The center of gravity is right about here if I was to balance this thing. Now look how close that center of gravity point is to this little bulge here. If I go to hold this right or left-handed, it's not going to matter. But would you look at that? The bone of my thumb is right where this little ridge is, with the center of gravity right here, and that ridge poking out right into your thumb without any kind of fillet between the pistol grip and the body of the blaster. This was wearing on my thumb the entire day I was using this thing. I was wearing light gloves. I typically wear light biking gloves or fingerless biking gloves when I play HVZ just for the sake of manipulating all of this stuff. But even with that, when I was done, I took them off and this was all red and beat up. And it's right on this ridge, this seam of the plastic here. I don't know why this is there. Aesthetically, sure, you could have moved this back here and it would have made a difference. You could have instead made a, I don't know, a feature that came up and then down. If it's just for aesthetics, and that's really it, there's no reason why this needs to exist. This guy here should not be a straight lead-in. Instead, it should be a fillet that comes in here. That wouldn't have made your pistol grip any thicker, but it would still have given your thumb and the web of your thumb a place to rest. So in terms of ergonomics, I'm really disappointed in this. In terms of semi-auto, not full auto, I'm really disappointed in this. The price of this when I bought it was $50 US. That was back in the, when was that? Probably the fall, early fall. Since then it has come down to, I saw online it was between 30 and 40 US dollars depending on where you were looking. So that's a little more reasonable. Compared to, let's say, I just have this nearby, so it's a similar reference frame, a semi-automatic flywheel-driven rival ball using blaster of similar size and maybe similar, I guess, intended use. It uses a top feeding here, or it uses a top feeding mechanism here, but still, this is a lot cleaner to hold and a lot more comfortable to hold than this guy is here, and it's 20 bucks. That being said, credit where credit is due. The Adventure Force Accelerator has a really wobbly magazine that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, and the Nerf rival Hera, once you get it in there, rock solid. I can pick this thing up and spin it around, and I don't feel like that's going to come out. So credit where credit is due. But geez, this bump here and everything is just a little too big for me. Maybe not for you, but for me, wow, this is disappointing because you don't get a good idea or a good feel of how big this thing is from the box. One last thing is when I was using this blaster, I ended up jamming two rival balls, basically got stuck here. And that semi-automatic mechanism, like I was saying, wasn't strong enough to push them through the wheels. And its stock configuration, I don't think the motors in those flywheels could handle it. So very possibly could have been error on my part, but I wasn't playing around and pulling the trigger or anything like that. And even so, you can't pull the trigger until you rev the flywheel. So I think what happened was a rival ball got caught in the wheels, and then another one got caught in that, basically that star flipper mechanism in there. Bottom line is, if you have big hands or something like that, maybe buy this blaster. Take a file to this piece if you can. Truth be told, I haven't opened this up yet, but just looking in here, doesn't really look or feel like there's anything too important there. So you might be able to just take this out in modification. If you plan to modify this, then great. I might make it look like there's a new rival blaster coming out that has basically magazine on top and a pistol grip here, a nice small pistol grip, or smaller than this one. I might just keep the mag in its current position, put a pistol grip here, or anywhere else than this, and then just saw this off. I don't know, but it needs modification to be at least comfortable for use in a war, or like an HVZ event. So, bottom line is, for me, it really isn't my favorite. There are several other blasters I would probably choose way before this one. Any kind of Striphoid or even pump action springers, anything like that. The Nerf rival Hera, bit of a disappointment.